Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode, we are not going to be doing a unit review or a tactics video. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at the new Rogal Dorn model itself and highlighting a potentially massive design flaw in the new tank. And when you see the rest of the video, you guys are going to absolutely love that opening pun. I was really proud of it. But without further ado, and hopefully avoiding any more cheesy puns, let's dive straight into today's video and have a look at what is getting the Guard community so riled up about the new Dorn model. Whenever a faction gets a new model, the community inevitably is very excited, and most people straight away start taking a look at what they do like about the design, what they don't like about the design, how they're going to incorporate into their force. The model comes under a huge amount of scrutiny. And the Rogal Dorn was no exception. A lot of people loved the really big chonky tank design, the fact it felt like something from Vietnam. People were generally really excited to get their hands on it and eager to add it into their motor pool. But as more promotional material came out around the Rogal Dorn, people started to notice something a little bit strange. And it was really obviously highlighted in this little bit of promotional artwork here, which is where you can see through the vents on the back of the Rogal Dorn down to the bottom of the model. But that's not the bottom of the model. As you can see, there is very clearly light shining through the Rogal Dorn vents. So does that mean that they've either painted the inside of the Rogal Dorn white, or they've had a light inside there to shine up maybe? Or does it mean that the Rogal Dorn is missing its bottom floor plate and this is the light shining through from the photo booth? Well, as it turns out, the Rogal Dorn does not have a bottom plate. It does not have a bottom. No bum. The Rogal Dorn is in assless chaps. I mean, all chaps are assless, but that's beside the point. The Rogal Dorn officially does not have a bottom plate on the vehicle. Now, the initial reaction from the Guard community was disappointment and a little bit of anger as well. We finally get a proper range refresh and they start cutting corners on us like this. If you actually look closely, not only does the Rogal Dorn lack a bottom plate, but if you look at the tracks that go on the underside, they are missing the little bit of plastic that represents the rubber part of each track. So you can see they've really tried to avoid putting any plastic into the kit that they don't need to, even down to tiny little slivers that go on the tracks. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I know many of you are there filling up the piss jugs, ready to start chucking them at GWHQ. And I will be right there on the picket line with you boys. But some members of the Guard community have made a very valid point, which is by not having this bottom plate, it does make magnetizing the Rogal Dorn much easier when it comes to its sponsons and some of the other extra weapons that you can put on it. That very well may be a valid point. It may even genuinely have factored into the design of the model. Games Workshop knows that they are cramming loads and loads of bits onto their kits these days, and many of those go to waste if you don't magnetize them. By giving easy access to magnets, they may have actually been doing something that is good for the player. Of course, we'll never know because Games Workshop doesn't really come out and say these kind of things, but it might have been a factor. But despite the level-headed and sensible arguments made by some members of the Guard community, this did not stop the rest of us going out there and making some pretty spicy memes. So I want to be clear, I've not made any of the memes here. I've just gone through and picked out a few of my favorite ones from the Astra Militarm subreddit. All of the credit goes to those guys that actually made these really, really great memes. So I love this first one. The Rogal Dorn crying, wide open bottom, ready to receive your shot. A little bit of an innuendo there, I imagine. And the Macarius Vanquisher, the solid brick of manly resin as God intended. I absolutely love this meme. I think it's brilliant. I also thought this one was pretty clever as well. Never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or the Blood Ravens where the Rogal Dorn's floor went. But this one has to be my absolute favorite. The fact that people are now comparing the Rogal Dorn to the car from the Flintstones is just brilliant and absolute top meme content. But the big question is, why did Games Workshop make this design choice? Surely they knew it would be very unpopular and people would not be excited to see their shiny new Rogal Dorn has a big part of it missing. Sure, it's on the underside, but still, no one wants to feel like they've been shortchanged on a model. Well, like we said earlier, it very well may have been a design choice. Games Workshop is evolving their design policy and philosophy, and they actually did take into account that people might magnetize their kits rather than buying several hundred of each one to get all the different parts. This is a very optimistic outlook, and I think realistically it comes down to one simple factor: money. I believe that Games Workshop did this to save pennies on each individual kit, which over the course of the Dorn's lifetime and its production run would lead to significant cost savings. Some people might say, but Mordian Glory, surely they just did it to fit it onto 3 sprues so that would also save costs. True, that is true, but I think really it came down to, you want to see real evidence for why I think they were just doing it to save every single penny that they could. Look at the tracks on the bottom of the Rogal Dorn. The fact that they didn't even include those tiny little bits of filler plastic for the bottom of the Rogal Dorn's tracks really feels to me like they were trying to cut every single penny out of production costs on this model. And that second explanation is the easiest for many of us to understand. It's probably the one that most of us jumped to in the first place. Classic big corporation trying to cut costs and shaft the little guy. But there is a third theory, and one which is just mad enough it might actually be true. And I want to say a thank you to channel supporter Arantanak because he came up with this theory in one of my recent live streams. What if this had nothing to do with Games Workshop being a scumbag trying to save some money here and there? I mean, at the end of the day, one of the core philosophies of Games Workshop, one of the things that makes them stand out above a lot of other model kit sellers is they sell a premium product for a premium price. Yes, Games Workshop models do tend to be a lot more expensive, but they are some of the best in the industry. As someone who has recently gone out and been playing many other game systems like Bolt Action, the kits from Warlord are great, but they are still quite a bit behind the kits you get from Games Workshop. They really do sell some of the most detailed and highest quality kits in the industry. Why would they suddenly start compromising that design philosophy? Because if the only reason I have to go to Games Workshop to buy their models is because I want the best in the business, if they start taking that away and cutting corners in a very obvious manner, like removing a whole floor plate from a model, then why wouldn't I just go for something that's cheaper and basically the same quality? What if Games Workshop was actually playing 4D chess and they were much smarter than we normally give them credit for? What if this had nothing to do with penny pinching on the kit side and had everything to do with combating the rise of 3D printed copies of their models? You see, one of the biggest threats to Games Workshop is 3D printing. The fact that people can just print off identical models to the ones that Games Workshop produce for pennies. And they have tried a number of ways of trying to combat this. Mostly, they've gone down the legal route, trying to sue companies and get them to cease their operations. But by and large, this has been unsuccessful. And in fact, even regular YouTubers who make their own 3D printing content have now been able to find it relatively easy to swat away the legal overtures made by Games Workshop. As a result of these traditional methods of Games Workshop enforcement now becoming less effective, perhaps they have turned to some more wacky and inventive ways of policing their product. And there is a precedent for this. We have seen Games Workshop and big events like LVO, which have been supported and sponsored by Games Workshop, removing models from the table which they believe to not be legitimate. Games Workshop themselves have tried this idea of weighing different resin models to make sure that they weigh the right amount, because apparently recaster resin weighs a different amount to legitimate GW Forge World resin, likewise with the 3D printing stuff as well. And also we've seen it at LVO when people were using Iron Hands Dreadnoughts. This was near the end of 8th edition, and the judges at LVO were saying, is that a legitimate Chaplain Dreadnought? If not, you can't use it in the event. Even if it's a regular Dreadnought you've converted, you have to have the OG original official Games Workshop variant to be allowed to use it in our tournament. So we've seen them be able to police this not only at their own events, but also of some events in the private sector as well. But the problem with these methods is that they're very imprecise. If you're asking a judge to eyeball whether a model is legitimate or a 3D printed one, you may find that very difficult. 3D printing has got very high quality, and it may be impossible to spot the difference between the two models. Also, weighing them is very risky, because what if you've got someone who has bought a legitimate Games Workshop model but then has decided to put some loving attention into converting it? Maybe they've made the model a bit lighter, maybe they've made it a bit heavier by adding stuff onto it. Are you going to say, well, this model doesn't weigh the right amount, so you can't use it? You would then be unfairly punishing someone. But what if you put a very simple yet effective design flaw in your model so that at a glance you could easily spot which ones were legitimate and which ones weren't? What if you just removed the floor plate from the Rogal Dorn? Now, of course, I'm not saying this is a perfect theory. There are, of course, many flaws with it, and some of you may be saying, oh, Mordy and Glory, you're just scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to trying to look into the mind of GW, but it is funny to talk about, and it is interesting to think that maybe this is something that is on Games Workshop's mind. But which of these theories do you think is the most likely? And do you have another one that I haven't talked about in this video? Put it all down in that comment section below. If you've enjoyed today's video, then make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you've really enjoyed today's video and you would like to see some more spicy meme content, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. By becoming a channel member or patron, you gain access to the Mordy and Glory Discord server, which is a community of over 900 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord, and we have channels for talking about tactics, army lists, hobbying, painting, 3D printing, and of course, a very tasty meme section as well. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to the latest channel members. So thank you to Double D, Grezagor's Boogle, Designation, Sergeant Dragonfire, Lord Oman, Red Morrison, Jason Wayland, Stephen Johnston, and this is JR. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you for becoming channel members. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a big thank you to Patrick, Mike, Byron Tiveld, Snake Eyes, Dustin Douglas, and Joachim de Graaf. Thank you guys for becoming Patreon supporters. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and of course, Sly Varney. Thank you guys for your very generous support. It really makes a huge difference and is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordy and Glory full time. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.